Now we still have a little more work to do inside of our spawner script, so we're going to go ahead and hop right back in there. And what we need to do is randomly assign a color to our enemies here. So what we're going to say is, if you remember that rend variable we put at the top, we're going to say rend is equal to clone.get component in children this time, because the renderer is not actually on our parent object here, but on one of its children or child objects. We're going to say get component renderer, and we're going to say what we want to use here is what's called a switch statement. So a switch statement is essentially an if statement that we can give multiple conditions to. So the way that this works is we say switch, and then we have our open and close parentheses, and we're going to say random.range 0 to 3. And that's going to give us 3 possible values back. This is going to return either a 0, a 1, or a 2. An important note about the random.range function is that it's actually this max value. This is the upper limit on what number we could get. It does not include that. It's exclusive. And if you highlight over the range thing, it says returns a random integer between min inclusive and max exclusive. That means that this minimum value can return the minimum value, but it cannot return 3. At most, it will return 2. That being said, what we can now do is drop inside of the curly brackets here and say case 0, which is if our case is 0, and we want to include our parentheses here. If the case is 0, as in if this function returns a 0, we want to execute some code. Now, we keep seeing this red line, and we hate it. We want to get rid of it. So the way to do that here is we need not a semicolon, but a colon. So that's, you hold shift and press the same key as you would for your semicolon. We need a normal colon. And underneath that, we're going to hit enter and then type break semicolon. So switch cases always need a break statement. Just like how enumerators need this yield return, our switches need this break. And here we're going to say rend.material.color equals color.cyan. And you can pick any color here. If you say color and put a period, the IntelliSense will show you all of your options. So you can say white, black, red, green, blue. It's up to you what color you want to use here. But I'm going to say let's go ahead and use cyan. Next, after our break statement, we're going to hit enter. And once again, we're going to type case with the parentheses. And this time, we're going to say case 1. So that means if this returns a value of 1, we're going to do some similar stuff here. So we'll hit enter, and we'll type that break so we get rid of that red line. And then we're going to say rend.material.color. And this time, we'll set the color to red. Finally, we have one more case, because remember, we can get a 0, a 1, or a 2. We're going to say case 2, colon, and then hit enter. And then again, we need that break statement. And we're going to say rend.material.color is equal to new color. And this time we're going to create our own custom color. So normally we'll just say color.red if we want a preset, but if we want to make a custom color, we can say new color, have this open and close parentheses, and then we're going to give it some values. So these 3 values, 1f, 0.6f, 1f, are going to represent red, green, and blue. So if you remember that color wheel, those colors that you pick are determined by red, green, and blue values. So this is kind of a way of shortcutting that color wheel and instead using code to create our own custom color. So before we can start testing our enemies in the game, we actually have to do a couple of things. The first thing we need to do is tell our particle system to play when we spawn. So what we're going to say is public particle system particle. And in our start function up here on top, we're going to say particle is equal to get component in children and particle system. And add our open and close parentheses and the semicolon. That's going to get that object that we put onto our spawner game object in the hierarchy. And then what we want to do is down here between where we are getting our renderer here and this last get component, we're going to add a little bit of space with enter, and we're going to say particle.play And what that'll do is play our particle system every time an enemy spawns. And then, of course, we can go ahead and save again. And what we want to do now is go back to our game and click on our spawner. And you'll see this NPC field is empty. So in order for our spawner to work, we need to tell it which NPC to spawn. So we're going to pick the skeleton, and we're going to go ahead and drag that guy into our NPC field. And if you want to be certain about making sure you get your particle system, you're welcome to drag it in here, but the get component call in our start will always override this value. So if you drag it in or don't, we'll still make sure we get this particle system with that line of code that we just wrote. Now you can go ahead and save your script one more time and go back to the editor view and play the game and see your enemies spawn.